What's up, everybody? It's Retro JoJo back again. Today, I want to rank the Star Wars movies based on my own personal opinion. So, this is just my own personal opinion. Everybody's list might be different, but this is just how I would rank them, just me personally. First, I want to talk about Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi. Last Jedi was a decent movie, in my opinion. Wasn't the best. Certainly wasn't George Lucas quality, to me, but it was a good movie. I will give it that. I did like some of the dogfights you got, like with Poe in the X-wing and things like that, and when he took down the dreadnought and things like that. I did enjoy those things. Some of the locales were interesting. However, uh, choreography wise, as far as the lightsaber duels and things like that, didn't intrigue me at all. Lost interest in how it was shot, just how the cinematography was shot for those duels. It was not interesting. And Snoke was one of the most uninteresting villains in all of Star Wars, in my opinion. I understand what they were going for, but he was taken down very easily. Just wasn't a good character. And then the whole, Rey and Kylo work together type of thing. And then the way they did Luke. In my opinion, Mark Hamill deserved better. He deserved a lot better. And I'm not bashing the directors. I'm just saying, I think, in my opinion, Mark deserved better. That his Luke was. That's not, like he said. He said it in his own words that was not his Luke. That was what they wanted. That was their vision. So they made him kind of a little bit of a wuss and a little bit of a sissy, in my opinion. Luke would have actually went and confronted Kylo. I understand what they were going for. Again, they were trying to kind of do the whole one with the Force thing, like Qui-Gon and Anakin / Vader and Yoda. But it didn't appeal to me. And then you had the whole, I cannot remember which planet it was, but they were on a planet towards the end of the movie. I don't want to, give it a lot away if you decide that you want to watch them. But I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking this is reminiscent of another movie. So overall, just not my absolute favorite. Now, moving on to the next spot is Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. When I seen this movie, I have to say my hopes were lowered, my standards for it were lowered because of the previous one that I mentioned. It did deliver a little bit better because you did get more characters. You had, Lando comes back and kind of fills the shoes of Han Solo with Chewbacca, and then, uh, there's just a lot of character development, and there's a lot of other things that take place that they feel more at home in during the movie. Although I will say they brought Palpatine back, and I understand now what the whole purpose of Snoke was based on the Rise of Skywalker. I understand they were trying to go for a expanded universe thing, but again, the movie itself, it did well. Just in my opinion, it did better than The Last Jedi, but it's still the same, movies. It's still a sequel trilogy, so it was okay. It was just okay. It had some moments, like the duels did feel like they tried to refine it a little better. The cinematography was better for those. They improved upon that. There were other characters that developed, and there were split offs, where you thought these characters were going to be together, and then they said, no, these characters are going to be together. So there were a lot of twists and turns. Thought it was interesting. There's a bunch of ships at the end of the movie during a fight scene that takes to the skies. How a lot of, or all the Star Wars movies, just about, they pan between 2 or 3 different things happening simultaneously, and that's one of the things that I thought was interesting about it. There's a lot of Easter egg ships from Expanded Universe in that movie. So that was why it didn't rank as the worst, in my opinion. Now I want to move on to Solo, a Star Wars story. I enjoyed Solo, a Star Wars story, but I mean, you had the Falcon. You got to see how, Han gets the Falcon, how he meets Chewbacca. Um, there's a bunch of good fight scenes in the movie. There's intriguing characters, and there's even an appearance at the end of the movie from Darth Maul. So it's a very good movie, but it just didn't the characters just they weren't as interesting as they were to me as they were in the original trilogy. That's just my opinion. They were more developed, they were more refined, and I understand what they were going for. They're trying to find a new audience for Star Wars, but it didn't deliver to me. It had its moments, but it fell short. And you do get to see how he got the Kessel to run in 12 parsecs. So that was interesting, and a very good scene with the monster creature that tries to drag them down. I cannot remember what that creature was called, but very good, very good movie. But I wouldn't say a very great movie. So now I want to talk about Rogue One, Star Wars story. When I seen Rogue One, I thought this movie's okay. This movie's just all right. And I'm a little biased because honestly, I played Dark Forces growing up, and if you know anything about Dark Forces, Kyle Katarn gets the Death Star plans. Well, now they changed the story. There's a lot of good things in the movie. I mean, the effects are great. The battles are expansive and feel vast, and there's a lot of good things going for it. It just, to me, Kyle Katarn found the Death Star plans though. But again, they've made some things legends, and then they've made other things now that Disney, with the Disney buyout, they made other things canon. So Kyle Katarn, as far as I remember, is Legends. So, and there's great characters, Jyn Erso and characters like that are great characters. There's like I said, a ton of great characters in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. But what sets it apart and why it ranked higher for me personally is not because of the new characters or anything like that. The final scene in the movie where Darth Vader is trying to take down the rebels to get back the Death Star plans. I just thought that was just well done. It shows how powerful he was, and it was a great scene. Very, very impressive scene, and it just had this raw feel to it. Like, this is how Darth Vader is. He's a Sith Lord. He's bad, bad to the bone, so to speak. So yeah. Now I want to talk about Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. When I watched The Force Awakens, and I watched it in theaters more than once with my mother, I was actually impressed. I have to admit, I liked it. Finn and Rey developing as characters, and then you meet Poe Dameron. And of course, everybody loves BB-8. Just in a very, very good story. But again, and then you have Kylo Ren. He's the big bad guy. But it just felt like something was missing. And the more that I watched the movie as I've watched it over the years since its release, I've realized something. And there's another movie that I mentioned on this list that did the same exact thing, but we will get to that. It was copying something, and after watching it more than once, I realized, yeah, because other people have pointed it out to me, and it's just something new for everybody. It's just, they're just trying to develop and take elements from it. I don't believe that's the case anymore. And that's just my opinion. It's still a great movie, and you have Harrison Ford reprises his role as Han Solo, and I believe Peter Mayhew came back and played Chewbacca one last. Well, he played. I think he played him in all three of the sequel trilogy movies. Excuse me. But that still have another actors come back does not make a movie good. You know, so but as far as everything else goes, how it looks, the locales, like Jakku and places like that, and then Starkiller Base, it's a great movie. If you haven't watched it, I do recommend that as the best out of the sequel trilogy. So now I want to move on to the next spot, and it is one of my favorite. I will admit it is one of my favorites. Not my absolute favorite, but Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. This movie was actually very close to me for a long time because um, there was a time in my life where I had moved somewhere, and um, this was actually one of the VHSs I had during that time period. So I watched it over and over and over, as a child, and it just, I mean, the merchandise was everywhere. There were, ads and posters up everywhere, restaurants, video game stores, there were video games, coming out, to kind of promote, et cetera, et cetera. There was a bunch of just merchandises everywhere for Attack of the Clones, even on chip bags, and you get a prize and cereal. You had the cereal with the lightsabers and the Jango Fett helmets, and it was everywhere, just so to speak. It was just everywhere. But when I watched this movie, even recently, I just liked it all over again. The way Anakin, you start to see a transition to the dark side after the death of his mother. Couldn't save her. The way that he starts to use his anger instead of just relying on the Force like he had been taught, by the Jedi and the Jedi Order. And there were all your favorite characters are there. I could list all of them, but everybody knows what my favorites are. I don't know why, but it's always been a thing. I always like either the bounty hunters, the mercenaries, and the bad guys, and then some of the good guys. But Jango Fett and Temuera Morrison did a terrific job playing Jango Fett. But Jango Fett's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, period. He did a great job, and Christopher Lee playing Count Dooku. Sir Christopher Lee couldn't have picked a better actor for Count Dooku. He has charisma throughout the movie. He's very just nonchalant when he has to fight a Jedi, almost like he's, just as prim and proper. And then with later shows, you do find out that he once was a Jedi, and that Yoda was actually his master. So, and that's another reason I love that movie. It brings a whole, you find out about the clone army, and you find out about they're clones of Jango Fett, and it was put in without the Jedi knowing for a clone army, and it's all to bring about, the grand scheme of the Sith, the grand master plan, so to speak. But overall, a great movie. It has one of the best battles in Star Wars history, which is the Battle of Geonosis and what started the Clone Wars. If you read into any of the material for Attack of the Clones, which I recommend, I have read some of it when I was in college. Very interesting. There were a lot of Jedi that died during that battle. It wasn't just a small scale thing. It was a large, and you do see that on screen. The way that George Lucas did the filming and everything. The only thing I can say that I don't really particularly care for about Attack of the Clones is the fact that it kind of feels a little forced sometimes. The dialogue sometimes it's not there. And the screenwriters give the actors what they need to say. They give them a screenplay, and then they write it up, and they go based off of what George Lucas wants or the director wants, and then in any scenario, any movie. Um, that's what they're paid to do. They make a screenplay, they make what the director wants, and then they give it to the actors. And sometimes they do allow them to improvise, but there may not have been any room for improv. They might have said, you have to say this just like this, even if you think it's dumb, even if you think it's just not right, you still have to say it that way because that's what they were getting paid for. So that's the only complaint I have about that movie. I mean, you get to see Anakin, you know, be torn between Padme and staying with, you know, staying the race and the course with the Jedi Order. So very good movie. Now I want to talk about the next spot, which is Episode 1, Phantom Menace. I remember very, very vividly around the time and also after this movie was released, there were, just like Episode 1, Episode 2, excuse me, this is Episode 1. Just like Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace also got a ton of merchandising, and also had Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut had different toys that you could get in, like the kids meals, Happy Meals, whatever you want to call it, the kids meals. But the movie itself, getting to the movie itself, was a very interesting movie. However, it did suffer from the same things as Attack of the Clones did. Phantom Menace suffered from the dialogue. Some of the dialogue just felt a little forced, but I will say that in Phantom Menace, Jar Jar was more of a comic relief than he was in Episodes 2 and Episodes 3 of the prequel trilogy. So he was a comic relief, and you have Boss Nass and characters like that, very memorable characters. You get to see R2, you know, come to the rescue in one scene and just show how, you know, he's very smart droid. So you get to see a lot of cool things in the movie. And then, of course, everybody's favorite bad guy, one of my favorite bad guys, Darth Maul. And I can say that when that movie was released, I was not supposed to have Darth Maul, any merchandise, Darth Maul, because, you know, he looked just menacing and evil, and that's what George Lucas wanted. He wanted him to look menacing. He wanted him to look evil because he was evil. He was, you know, the epitome of evil. You know, he was supposed to be trained by one of the most evil Sith of all time, and that was his right hand, so to speak. So Darth Maul is one of my favorites, and there's not much else I can really say about the movie. Battle of Naboo was, you know, one of the best battles. Also, you get to see the battle droids come out onto the plains of Naboo, and the Gungans standing their ground with their shields and their they had like these shields that they would activate, and then they could cover their body with them, and you know, Boombas, the bombs and things like that they used. Just a very great movie. The screenplay was great, and the reason I say that the cinematography was great, the lightsaber duel, that's my main drawing point for why this movie ranked so high. John Williams with the Duel of Fates alongside Ian McGregor playing Obi-Wan and Liam Neeson playing Qui-Gon, and then you had, I cannot remember the actor's name right at this moment. Let me know if you remember who played Darth Maul, because I'm drawing a blank. I had it in my mind, but now I cannot remember. But them fighting to the epic score of Duel of the Fates, it was just, you know, this is the fate of the galaxy. Either it can go this way or that way based on who wins this duel. And Darth Maul was, like I said, he was trained in the ways of the Sith, and they were trained in the ways of the Jedi. And then the mighty fall. The mighty, you know, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn falls at the blade of Darth Maul, which enrages Obi-Wan. And then we find out later that after Obi-Wan had, you know, disfigured Darth Maul, so to speak, he does come back in shows and other, you know, media. So just a great movie, a fun movie. If you want to start with a good one, and you know, I will say this, and you have, you know, a child or something, they'll enjoy this movie because there's a lot of comic relief in it. And I really, a lot of people hate Jar Jar, but I think he gives it a little bit of comic relief along with the Space Odyssey drama, you know, that's typical of a Star Wars movie. You know, you have, it's what it is. So, very good movie. Now I want to talk about the next spot, Episode 4, A New Hope, which originally was just called Star Wars because in 1977, George Lucas was just gonna, he didn't know there were gonna be any more. And look at what it is today. But who knew? You know, who knew? But A New Hope or Star Wars, just great casting. When you talk about Star Wars, that's a starting point, and you can tell, you know, that it, listen, there's a lot of games and movies and things like that are coming out now. They didn't have the technology they did back then. So to rank it lower because of some of the limitations wouldn't be fair. You have to go based on what the story is, and the story is fantastic. You know, you have your band of rebels, and they're trying to fight this evil empire, and then there's this mysterious Darth Vader, and then there's this other mysterious character, you know, in the shadows somewhere, because he has to have a master, right? He's a Sith. He has to have a master somewhere, and it's just very luminous and feels very, you know, fresh even today. Even though it came out in '77, you have Leia, you have Luke, you have Han, all these memorable characters, Grand Moff Tarkin, just memorable characters, memorable scenes that hold a place in my heart. And yeah, the Death Star scene, just a fantastic scene. I mean, you have Vader chasing down X-Wings and shooting them down, and his, you know, TIE fighter pilots taking them down, and, you know, back and forth between the two sides. And that's what the whole idea behind Star Wars is: good versus evil, and who will win. And just George Lucas is a very good director. That's all I can say, and creator of the Star Wars world. Just there's nothing bad about the, you know, choreography in that movie. There's memorable places, the way that it was shot, the screen, you know, the cinematography. I mean, and the screenplay, as far as the lines that are used go, it was spot on. You know, the whole, it started a whole thing even with who shot first, Han or Greedo. And then of course, you know, you have the special edition, which is the one that I'm going off of. There are more scenes that are added. The stormtroopers, or sand troopers as some call them, you know, searching for the droids, C-3PO and R2-D2, just fantastic. He went back and added it. Some people hate the new scenes. They only watch the original. And I have both, and I can compare the two, and I think they're a nice added bonus. And originally I will say this real quick. Originally, in the original that was released on home video after, you know, it was in theaters, the scene with Jabba the Hutt, you know, the interaction between Han Solo and he is not in the original cut. It's only in the special edition. It was added in because originally the original actor didn't have that kind of a, you know, the puppet. He didn't. There was nothing. There was just him in his Star Wars garb, and there was no, Jabba wasn't a slug. He was just a gangster. He was just a thug. So I thought that was very interesting. They gave Jabba more character, and it's a good thing they did because he appears in another movie. So now I want to talk about the next spot, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now a lot of people say, I've heard people say, that's my favorite. That's my absolute favorite, and I would not disagree with them that it's a great movie. I seen it 6 times in the movie theater when it came out. And I used to go almost every weekend with my mom. We would go, and then we'd go to the mall and, you know, have our day out together. So it was very, very great movie to me, and it made it, you know, kind of a sentimental thing. Because I had the shirts, I had the, you know, this is the first movie since, you know, since Attack of the Clones. We hadn't had anything since that. And then we get Revenge of the Sith, and I believe it was 2005. just a fantastic movie. It shows, how the mighty fall. Anakin falls to the dark side. He's seduced, you know, by Sidious, and it shows his descent into madness, basically, because he thinks he's going to lose Padme because he had a vision, he had a dream that she was going to die during childbirth, which of course is Luke and Leia. Um, and then the scene on my favorite scene in the whole movie, you know, is the one where Anakin and Obi-Wan fight on Mustafar, and Anakin loses to Obi-Wan, and then he's burned up. Uh, and it's almost like, if you know anything about older movies, you'll know that it's reminiscent. George Lucas was going for Frankenstein's monster. That's what he was going for. It very much feels like Vader slash Anakin is Palpatine's monster because he created him, and he wanted him to be enraged. He wanted him to hate himself. So, very good movie. I believe it was the first Star Wars movie to receive a PG-13 rating. That hasn't been the last one since. There are others now that have that rating. They're still good movies. They only did that because there were, some scary images in the movie, but overall, and a little bit more violence also. But overall, just a great movie. And the scene where Obi-Wan takes Grievous out. I mean, General Grievous was one of the best, characters, and one of the most deadly and dangerous, trained by Count Dooku. So for him to be taken out the way that he was, I thought it showed how powerful Obi-Wan really was in the story. So great movie. Yeah, it does have some of that prequel magic, the screenplay. I keep ranting about the screenplay about the prequels, but I can't say it enough. Some of the lines are cheesy. They hit the nail on the head, but then it's like it gets bent. It gets the point across, but then they have to go further and make sure, did they get it? So it's still very good though. I enjoy the movie. I watch it almost every single year, all of them, to be honest. Just Star Wars as a whole has been a big part of me. So now I want to move on to runner-up spot, Star Wars Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. Now, if anybody knows me, you would ask me, why wouldn't this be higher? And the only reason you would probably ask me that is because of who my favorite character in Star Wars is, and that's Boba Fett. Boba Fett gets the most screenplay up until the point of the release of the movies, of course. He does get more screen time in some of the new shows that have come out, which, made me just giddy with joy when they decided to make Boba Fett, relevant again. But what stood out about this movie also is not just Boba Fett, because they could do a whole movie on Boba Fett if they wanted to, and they've done a show, and he's been in another show. He had his own, and so there's plenty of media that covers Boba Fett. But as far as the story goes, it continues right after A New Hope, and they're on the run from the Empire, and Vader's hunting them down for his master, Sidious or Palpatine or the Emperor, whichever you prefer to call him. He was well known as the Emperor during the original trilogy. But, however, the scene at Hoth, that is what made this movie. You had the AT-ATs, you had the snow speeders. It was just iconic. Like I said, I believe John Williams did all the music for almost all of the trilogy, except for I believe it's the sequel trilogy, the newest one. He didn't, I don't believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comment. Let me know if he did do any work, or like helped the other music directors or anything like that. But as far as story goes, it's fantastic. Luke finds out that Vader's his father. He loses his hand to Vader. And he feels the same pain as his father before him through that. Anakin lost many limbs and became the monster that he is, which is Darth Vader. So it's reminiscent. Luke lost something too at the hands of his father. who's now a robotic, mech slash monster guy. He's not really human anymore. He's considered humanoid. And the way that Luke, is rescued at the end, and then you have Cloud City is just a beautiful location, and just the music blends well together. Han Solo gets put in carbonite. You have the iconic, I love you, I know lines from Han and Leia that they exchange, and it just feels like a fantastic Star Wars movie. The script is fantastic. The characters, they're all back. They're memorable. You have Lando, he's introduced in the movie. All the iconic ships. You have the Slave One, you have the Millennium Falcon, you have the Executor, Vader's Star Destroyer. There's just a lot to love about the movie. James Earl Jones, and he was Vader and the voice of Vader in the first film, or the first of the original trilogy. But him being Vader and delivering the lines that he does, nobody else could have done it like James Earl Jones. He's just very legendary and iconic voice, even in other movies that he's been in. So just all around a very, very well-rounded and great movie. Now I want to move on to the very last one, the first spot, the only one left. That is Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. When I seen Return of the Jedi for the first time, I was probably 3 or 4, and I have vague memories of it. But I can tell you this, watching it over the years, I see its potential, I see its greatness. It is, to me, my favorite Star Wars movie. And you say, well, if you're a Boba Fett fan, he had more, screen time in the Empire Strikes Back. And I wouldn't argue with you. But he does have screen time in Return of the Jedi. And it's about the story also. It's not just about one character, it's about all the characters. And, you have the Death Stars being reconstructed as Death Star 2. There's a lot of good versus evil that's coming to a end. It's coming to the very top, the boiling point, so to speak, of where it's going to end. Is it going to end with, is Luke going to turn to the dark side, or is he going to bring back balance? And there's Jabba the Hutt is in the movie. You get to see Jabba's palace, the Max Rebo band, and it's also been revised with new scenes in the special edition from the original, and it has a new song that's changed from the original with Cy Snoodles and the Max Rebo band, and it's just overall a great movie. It's a fun time. You get to see your very first look at a Rancor in Jabba's Rancor pit. And you see both sides of it, because then it was gonna eat Luke, have him for lunch, and he killed it. But then you see Malakili is very upset. He's a Rancor keeper. He's a human, and him and his alien friend are very upset. They're Rancor keepers. And then if you watch like I said, the Book of Boba Fett, if you watch that show, you'll understand why. I'm not going to spoil that, but you'll understand why they were upset. Very great development of characters. Even the side characters feel like they get developed. Even the ones that get like maybe 2 seconds of, or 2 minutes, or 7 minutes, or 10 minutes of, on film, they get a little bit of development. Maybe not a lot, but they just feel like they're well-rounded characters. They feel, just responsive, and you understand them, and there's no cheesy lines. The lines are all, there's a very serious tone to it. And Luke goes back, as he was on Dagobah. I meant to mention this in Empire Strikes Back. He goes back to see Yoda, because Yoda's the one that was training him. Obi-Wan dies in A New Hope, and what I thought was interesting, he goes back and Yoda tells him, Luke wanted to confirm that Vader was his father. And, Yoda says, your father he is. And he says, he told he did you? And he says, yes. And he said, unfortunate this is. And Luke is conflicted anyway. He's conflicted about why is it bad that he knew the truth? Even Obi-Wan's Force Ghost comes to him and he tells him that what he told him was true, that Vader did murder and betray Anakin. And he says from a certain point of view, and Luke says from a certain point of view, like as a question, and Obi-Wan tells him many of the things that we cling to base, or, realities or something like that, something to that effect that we cling to are based on our own view of reality. And just iconic lines, great locales, Endor, the Ewoks, they're always fun. Ewoks are always fun. And then you get the climactic battle between good versus evil, with father versus son, and right in front of the Emperor, who's the most evil man in the galaxy, who is Vader's master. He's the puppeteer. And but when he cuts Vader's hand off, he realizes that he has a mechanical hand. He understands that made him feel a little less human, so to speak. I believe that's what George Lucas was going for. Hey, I have one of those too. I'm not all human, skin and bones and flesh anymore. I lost something. And Vader had lost almost everything. So he understands his father's pain in that moment. And then you get where Palpatine is tormenting Luke and torturing Luke with the Force lightning. And it's not actually just Luke that brings balance. And this is what makes this movie my absolute favorite. It's Vader, who turns back to basically being Anakin at the end when he sees his son being tormented. And he says, enough is enough of this. This is my opportunity to kill my master, to take, but no longer did he want to take it because he wanted to be the ruler of the galaxy. He just wanted to bring back balance. He realized he had done wrong, and he realized his son wanted to bring back the balance. So he stepped in and didn't let him be destroyed by the Emperor. And I believe that the reason it's one of my favorites is because it shows there's good in everyone. But even people like, as a pitcher like Vader, who fell to the dark side, there's still good in everybody, though. You have a choice. So that's why it's my favorite. And like I said, just a very well-rounded movie. I want to mention something really quickly, though. What I was talking about earlier about some of the films from the sequel trilogy, how they copied some things. Force Awakens, it copied some things from A New Hope. If you look at Starkiller Base and then you kind of look at A New Hope with the Death Star, they do feel reminiscent. They do feel kind of the same. And it just, I don't know, that's why it ranked lower for me in my ranking. And then with The Last Jedi, and then you compare it to Empire Strikes Back, again, when they're on the planet and Luke goes down to confront, Luke is there, to confront Kylo Ren, who he trained, who turned to the dark side and destroyed the Jedi Temple, much like his grandfather. It just felt like I was watching the Battle of Hoth again. And that's what they were going for. They wanted to recreate it, but appeal to the new generation with new locales, and that's fine. That's, you can take from things, but to me, just don't copy it exactly. So I hope everyone is staying safe, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. Just let me know what you'd like to see next. I want to mention this at the end of this video. I thought about doing some like figure reviews, like talking about some of the best, maybe of the Black Series that they've released and things like that. If you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments. And as always, like, subscribe, and I hope everyone's staying safe, and God bless everyone.